And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is a Ken Hudnall show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's September the 22nd, 265th day of the year. Just 100 days remain to the year's over with. And we get to start a new year. Holidays observances. National Elephant Appreciation Day, Hobbit Day, National Ice Cream Cone Day, National White Chocolate Day, World Rhino Day, National Girls Night In Day, World Car Free Day. Everybody ride bicycles or walk. That'd be an interesting day. Chainmail Day. Find a pattern online and get your soldering iron. Learn how to make this defensive monstrosity of fantasy and historical battle. National Family Day, Falls Prevention Awareness Day, Dear Diary Day, National Centenarians Day, American Business Women's Day, National Flaunt Your Favorite Beach Towel Day, National Eggwear Day, International Day of Radiant Peace, National States and Capitals Day. Today is the first day of autumn. Summer is officially over. Fall Equinox, Independence Day in Bulgaria, National Online Recovery Day, and a National Week of Deaf People. Seed Gathering Season, Red Valley, Sea Otter Awareness Week, National Eye Health Week, Child Passenger Safety Awareness Week, Rosh Hashanah begins today. And for those not familiar with it, it's the Jewish New Year. Brings together the moments of joy and reflection. Families get together and share meals filled with symbolic foods like apples dipped in honey, wishing for sweetness ahead. The shofar, or ram's horn, sounds during services, stirring hearts and minds. The last calls for inner reflection and a fresh start. More than a celebration, it actually invites personal growth. Begins the 10 days of awe, period leading to Yom Kippur. During this time, individuals look inward, assess their actions, and seek to improve. Something to definitely keep in mind. National Older Workers Employment Week. Tirana International Film Festival. There's all kinds of festivals going on these days. It's a vibrant celebration of cinema held in the heart of Albania. Brings together filmmakers and actors and movie enthusiasts from around the globe and includes a diverse range of films, including dramas and documentaries and animations. It's actually a platform for new voices in the industry to share their work and connect with a broad audience of film enthusiasts. Fiesta de San Pacho, which goes on to October the 5th. It's as I've said before, it's a vibrant celebration in honor of St. Francis of Assisi. You find it in Quibdó. And the city becomes a stage where people showcase their heritage through parades and performances. I've talked to a couple of folks who are familiar with it, and they say it's definitely something that you don't need to miss. Migraine Awareness Week, National Surgical Technologies Week, National Indoor Plant Week, Recycle Now Week, National Drive Electric Month. Famous people born on this date, Joan Jett. Well, on that note, let us see what stories we have in the news. Maybe. Charlie Kirk's widow reveals unthinkable moment in the secret to their strong marriage. Erica Kirk actually forgave her husband's killer at a memorial service. He said that's what Charlie would do. Most of us would say hang him. Erica Kirk's the widow of slain Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk. Remembered her husband's legacy at a memorial for him on Sunday. Paula Robinson is the individual who's been charged in Charlie Kirk's death. But according to Erica Kirk, he was not much different than the other young men that Charlie met. Well, President Trump was at the Arizona Memorial. It drew a record 90,000 people. Thousands of people attended the memorial services on Sunday at the State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. President Trump, Vice President Vance attended the memorial for Kirk. Both described him as a friend. State Farm Stadium, of course, is home to NFL's Arizona Cardinals. It's got the capacity to host 64,000 people, which can be expanded to 73,000 for mega events. Across the U.S., mourners have taken to social media since Kirk's murder to share prayers and tributes. Others held vigils to honor his legacy. President Trump, in his speech, praised Erica Kirk's strength and poise following his speech. Well, the FBI, according to Kash Patel, says the agency is investigating theories and questions surrounding Charlie Kirk's murder. In a social media post on X, Patel affirmed he's committed to ensuring the investigation into Charlie Kirk's assassination is thorough and exhaustive. He said they're investigating every facet of the assassination. He said we're meticulously investigating theories and questions, including the location from where the shot was taken, possibility of accomplices, the text message confession and related conversations, Discord chats and angle of shot and bullet impact, how the weapon was transported, hand gestures observed as potential signals during Charlie at the time of his assassination. It's going to be a thorough investigation by all accounts. Well, the interesting thing, going back to the Biden administration, according to Harris, Pete Buttigieg was her first choice for VP. And unfortunately, according to Harris, the country wasn't ready for a gay vice president. If she'd have been a straight white male, she said, she could have chosen him. Well, in looking at the Biden team, former Biden aide has exposed the fact there was a White House cult. His aides were called the nastiest people that several people had encountered. Members of the Biden team were told nobody to parrot one line. Nobody runs for president for 4 years, and that was their strategy. Harris has a book coming out, according to recently released excerpts, and it says what insiders whispered for years: the Biden bubble was full of bullies. Former vice president is finally saying the quiet part out loud. Biden won the most votes of anybody for president in our country's history, but he never won the hearts and minds of the American people. especially not those in his own party. White House was filled with its share of cartoonish characters out of a badly cast high school version of the West Side Story. They thought they were BFD because they'd worked in a previous administration or because the campaign defied the odds and beat the expectations. But frankly, they didn't have the instincts. They, in many cases, didn't know what they were doing. Well, a UVU professor, former FBI agent, has warned of a new pattern of political violence after the Charlie Kirk assassination. UVU is Utah Valley University. And he's warning that this new wave of political violence appears to be increasingly targeting everyday citizens, not just political figures. The Minneapolis church shootings and the Charlie Kirk shooting were different, according to Greg Rogers, who spent 30 years in the FBI, medium as a SWAT sniper. He said these are just citizens that are being murdered for political reasons, which is certainly not unique and brand new, but it's happening more frequently. We haven't seen much of that. If you think about political assassinations in the past, even in modern times, you got John and Bobby Kennedy. Ronald Reagan was shot. You got George Wallace. When he was governor, he was shot. They were all big national public figures. Now, everyday people are targets. Well, Angelina Jolie has criticized America in a free speech plea. She waded into political waters Sunday at the San Sebastian Film Festival in Spain. She was asked during the press conference what she feared as an artist and an American. And she said that was a difficult question. I love my country, but at this time I don't recognize my country. She said, I've always lived internationally. My family's international, my friends. My worldview is equal, united, and international. Anything, anywhere that divides or limits personal expression and freedoms of anybody, I think is very dangerous. And she's one of many that believes the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel is assault on free speech. Well, the Southern California high school student was suspended after his MAGA hat sparked a dispute. Orange County, California high school student said he was suspended after his Make America Great Again hat was stolen, sparking a political argument with another student. This was at Laguna Beach High School. He and several friends wore MAGA hats on September 11th to honor Charlie Kirk. And he said, Kirk's death really affected us. I may not agree with everything he says, but I appreciate he encourages students to think critically, consider both sides, and engage in honest discussion. At the end of the school day, he said, a female student grabbed his hat and threw it in the girls' bathroom trash can. A political argument followed, during which the student used profanity when speaking about President Trump. According to Hornstein, the group got over it and moved on, but at a teacher's direction, he filed an incident report and requested a written apology. As a result, the school suspended both students. Hornstein called the suspension extremely upsetting and unsettling because it interfered with his rigorous AP class schedule. Well, the offender, if you will, was suspended as well. And that was a complete overreaction. It was a highly emotional day for everybody on 9/11, and she made a mistake for which she later apologized. Well, the young man's mother, Janet Semenova, told Fox her son is an honor student and never been disciplined before. She thinks he was targeted for his political views. And of course, politics gets involved in everything we do these days. Well, there's been a unusual theft Legendary Pharaoh's gold bracelet was stolen from a popular museum. And according to officials, it was actually sold melted down. This was stolen out of an Egyptian museum, according to local officials. This bracelet that once belonged to Pharaoh Usamattre Amenemope was announced by the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. Officials circulated images of the artifact at airports and border crossings. It was taken from the Restoration Laboratory at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Restoration specialists took the bracelet from a safe at the museum on September 9th, gave it to a silver jeweler, who then sold it to a gold jeweler for $3,735. Bracelet was then sold to a gold foundry worker for $4,025 and melted it down with other metals. Egyptian officials said the money was seized and all 4 suspects have been arrested. Well, nothing is safe these days. Phil Mickelson took a swipe at Democratic representatives for speaking hateful rhetoric after the Charlie Kirk assassination. It was Representatives Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, and Jasmine Crockett, Democrat of Texas. It's interesting to see just who's coming down on which side of this question. And from Omar and Crockett, both believe they should be running the country and not President Trump. So they're going to be very negative anything to do with President Trump. Well, Representative Jasmine Crockett also slammed the white lawmakers who voted to honor Charlie Kirk. She reflected on her decision to vote against a measure honoring Turning Point USA co-founder Charlie Kirk, condemning political violence. Says it hurt her heart that only 2 Caucasians joined her opposition to it. It's interesting to see who plays the race card. Well, President Trump has announced a plan to award Ben Carson the Presidential Medal of Freedom, noting there will be a ceremony at the White House to honor him. He said, "Congratulations, Ben. He didn't know this. I hope he's happy." That was some of President Trump's words after he made the announcement at the conclusion of his remarks at the American Cornerstone Institute Founders Dinner on Saturday. The Carson, who founded the American Cornerstone Institute, served as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development during Trump's first term in office. Carson's a former neurosurgeon. Ran for president when President Trump mounted his first successful White House bid, but dropped out and backed Trump in 2016. Well, China has weaponized science against the U.S. In April, China imposed export restrictions on 7 rare earth elements and crippling America's manufacturing across dozens of critical sectors. Ford actually temporarily shuttered production lines while European suppliers closed entire factories. In one move, Beijing demonstrated its power to hobble the West. This economic warfare represents decades of strategic planning. While America slept, China cornered the market on materials essential to modern civilization. By controlling 90% of rare earth processing capacity, it dictates prices and decides who receives supplies. So we'll see how that continues and what, if anything, President Trump's going to do about it. Well, let's see. Miss America defends the pageant makeup after social media trolls took aim at her. When Cassie Donegan was crowned Miss America, she never imagined her victory would be quickly overshadowed by a wave of criticism about her appearance. Several users online quickly flooded social media with critiques of her pageant makeup. They argued the 28-year-old looked heavy and harsh under the glaring stage lights. Some even claimed that the runner-up, Sadie Shamir, representing Texas, should have won instead. Donegan, who represented New York at the competition on September 7th in Orlando, told Fox News she's not letting the hateful words get under her skin. And she has to understand somebody's always going to have a comment to make. Well, President Trump and Elon Musk were spotted together. That's after their public rift. They were both at the Charlie Kirk Memorial. They apparently have buried the hatchet and not in each other. Well, a gunman attended a wedding, yelled "Free Palestine," and started shooting. This was at a New Hampshire country club. The shooter killed a man and wounded 2 other adults during a wedding at a New Hampshire country club on Saturday after yelling "Free Palestine." Tom Bartleson of Pepperell, Massachusetts, told the outlet that he was at the Sky Meadow Country Club in Nashua, New Hampshire, for his nephew's wedding when he heard an individual say that children are safe and "Free Palestine." He said the shooter appeared to be targeting somebody. Everybody got together for a dance for the bride and groom, and then all the chaos broke out. There were 6 shots, and everybody ducked for cover. Next thing you know, we're rushed into safe spots and things like that. The suspect was 23-year-old Hunter Nadeau. He's accused of fatally shooting 59-year-old Stephen DeCesare. Authorities say there's no known connection between the 2 men. Doesn't take much to upset a lot of people these days. And German officials have condemned a store owner who put a sign in the window that said the Jews were banned from entry in order to protest Israel. This was in the northern city of Flensburg. This sign was posted on Wednesday. Jews are banned from entering the store. That sparked outrage among state officials in Schleswig-Holstein. Hans Velten Reich, the 60-year-old owner of the store that sells Gothic utensils and technical literature, had put the sign up that said Jews are banned from entering here. Nothing personal, no anti-Semitism, just can't stand you. The Germany's largest daily newspaper, Bild, reported Thursday that Reich defended his anti-Jewish sign, telling the paper, "I watched the news every evening. When I saw what the Jews were doing in the Gaza Strip, I lost my temper and printed the sign." Well, Israel had launched a defensive war against Hamas after Hamas slaughtered over 1,200 people, October 7th, 2023. Police told him to take down the sign. The Schleswig-Holstein Minister of Culture, Dorit Stink and Gerhard Ulrich, state's controversial anti-Semitism commissioner, took Reich to task for his reported anti-Semitism. They said a sign that denies Jews access to a store is a frightening signal and an attack on the principles of our free coexistence. Well, I think that has pretty much got the major news stories. Most one other thing. Democrats are doing their best to force a government shutdown. President Trump says he's not going to allow that to happen. So we'll see how that plays out. All right. Now, we've been talking about a lot of strange and off the wall things. We have talked about Roswell. Do you know there is a Mexican Roswell? That refers to the Chihuahua UFO crash. That was an incident that took place August 25th, 1974, near the Texas-Mexico border. According to the story, the plane took off from an airport and crashed into a UFO that was flying overhead. Led to a covert government recovery effort. Been a couple of good books that have come out about it that goes into quite some detail. Now, this crash, which was, as I say, a UFO and a private plane that were traveling in opposite directions, collided over the Mexican desert, right near the Rio Grande. Flaming wreckage of both aircraft fell, prompting a race between the U.S. and the Mexican government to recover potential extraterrestrial technology. And the events alleged to have involved a covert recovery mission and a subsequent cover-up by government agencies. Been a number of TV shows about the Mexican Roswell. Interestingly enough, you go on the internet and try to look it up, you get some of the best stories you ever want to see about Mexican food, but you don't find much about UFOs and that incident. But UFO aficionados, certainly are well aware of it. Now, we have some more stories about ghosts. This time, some of the most haunted locations we're going to discuss are theme parks. You know, every location on the planet has got the potential to be haunted, and amusement parks are no exception. They can be host to the same sources of paranormal activities in any other location, such as cemeteries, fatal accident scenes, and where human remains have been scattered. Now, why would an amusement park of all places be haunted? Logically, the energy that brings up something like that would be centered around where negative events occur. So why would an amusement park be considered negative? These places are dedicated to happiness and good times. Now, there's no avoiding the fact that with millions of visitors a year, there's going to be accidents. And despite the great effort undertaken by the parks to make them as safe as possible, there are over 30,000 accidents in U.S. amusement parks every year. Many are simply slips and falls, and some are life-altering or even fatal. A lot of incidents are of suspicious origin as well. And there are hundreds, possibly thousands of malfunctions every year, many of which are considered suspicious. Some malfunctions result in death, and those are just the operational parks. There are also a number of abandoned parks to consider as well. The North America alone has over 1,000 shuttered amusement parks. Some are closed because of changing fads and financial mishaps and competition. But others close under, shall we say, more suspicious circumstances. Even the abandoned parks report no paranormal activity or creepy during the day. There's a sort of a lingering sadness that a place that once provided such happy memories to visiting children now lies abandoned and decaying. Now, parks go to great lengths to make visitors as safe as possible, which is perhaps why people let their guard down. And when their guard is down, parents may allow their child to wander a little further away and take their eyes off them just a little bit too long. And amazingly enough, amusement parks have become a favorite place to scatter the ashes of a loved one. This fad's become increasingly common in the past few decades. And it's, in fact, been a problem for most parks. Now commonplace for park attendees. Riding a lightning-fast roller coaster with eyes and mouths wide open and suddenly be covered in greasy gray ash. And these ashes cling to everything, irritating the eyes and filling the mouth. How would you like to get a mouthful of cremated human remains at an amusement park? And water attractions are often the location for ash spreading as well. Crystal water can suddenly turn murky and a dusty film spreads across the surface as clumps of the deceased bob nearby. Now, one important consideration is what used to be located where the amusement park now stands. In fact, there are likely human remains from an old cemetery, or an Indian burial ground, or a battle, or some other sources under any given spot in the civilized world. There are murders and fatal accidents and suicides that have taken place in countless locations around the globe. And chances are something disruptive to the spirit realm has happened in virtually every spot where a developer has chosen to break ground. Well, just a few decades ago, it was common for hundreds of noteworthy archaeological sites on private land to vanish under roads and houses and buildings every year. And today, you can find that problem's gotten even worse as the increased rate of development far outstrips any increase in archaeological preservation efforts. Private lands are rarely studied for archaeological significance before being developed, and even when something is unearthed, the landowners either consider the find theirs or ignore it completely. Artifacts are left as is or pulled out of the ground and stashed or sold. A discovery of a grave or a cemetery is usually insufficient to deter a developer from moving forward, not when money's going to be made. Well, let's start with Six Flags over Texas, in Arlington, Texas. It's the flagship park of the Six Flags chain. Six Flags over Texas Amusement Park was developed on a 212-acre plot east of Fort Worth and west of Dallas. Opened up August 5th, 1961, after being under construction for a year. And the origin of paranormal activity on this site is assumed to come mainly from the location it was built on. It's unknown if any thought was given to what might have been located on the spot previously, although in this case there might not have made much of a difference. The events that occurred at this location would not have prevented the park's development from taking place. The initial investment of $10 million was made by a real estate developer by the name of Angus Wynn Jr. after Wynn visited Disneyland in California. He named his new park Six Flags Over Texas for the 6 different flags of the nations that had governed Texas: Spain, France, Mexico, the Republic of Texas, the United States, and the Confederate States. Initially, the park is divided into 6 areas, each representing one of the 6 flags. Over time, of course, more areas have been added to the park, but the original 6 areas still remain there. Well, the 60s were a decade of growth for Six Flags Over Texas. A lot of attractions were added, as were 2 new sections of the park. One was Boom Town, named for the boom towns that sprang up during the Texas oil boom. And the other one is the Tower section, named for the Oral Derrick Observation Tower built in 1969. It was also in the 60s that park goers witnessed the first paranormal activity. As early as 1962, there were reports of floating orbs of ghostly light, highly localized temperature changes, and even some physical phenomena. People reported disembodied voices and hair pulling. This was around the park's Texas section. Well, there's not a whole lot of detail about these encounters, but they do correspond with incidents that were later reported. During the same time period, the park also saw the birth of two attractions that became classics. And the Serdaro, a log flume ride in 1963, and the Runaway Mine Train roller coaster in 1966. By the end of the 60s, attendance had reached almost 2 million visitors a year. Well, the earliest recorded encounters with an apparition at the park were in the 1970s. According to witness report, parkgoers saw a ghostly little girl who was sweet but naughty, most often encountered in the Texas section of the park. She said to flick the lights off and on, even appeared to some people, but for whatever reason, nobody knows. After several of these encounters and sightings, an investigation was conducted, and some actual research was done on the area. It was discovered that a little girl named Anne had died in Johnson Creek in the early 1920s. Now, Johnson Creek runs across the property, which is the same spot the park is today, specifically the park's Texas area. Now, she's said to be very friendly, but she can be naughty as well. There are numerous recorded encounters with her, and the employees of Six Flags Over Texas have seen her many times. Even has a room in a yellow house near the entrance to the Texas Giant. Notable incident occurred on this spot. A woman fell to her death on July 19, 2013, while riding in the Texas Giant. Now, her death, of course, isn't considered to be associated with any, but rather a coincidence. But you do have to wonder, did she see, feel, or hear something? Is there a spiritual connection? Since the 70s, there have been a lot of reports of paranormal encounters, incidents including objects moving on their own and disembodied voices saying, "Can I play with your hair?" and another voice that says, "Can we play together?" And there are several reports of spots on chairs where the temperature is markedly colder than the surrounding area. These spots are isolated, and there's no apparent logical cause for the temperature difference, or at least none have been reported. Also, no mention of the attempted moving of the chairs to see if the cold spot followed or maybe do some other experiments. Also, 2 reported incidents of hair pulling when no other person was nearby. Reported incidents weren't the pulling of a single hair, which, like what might happen if a single hair had gotten caught in some clothing, but rather the violent tugging of a handful of hair. Well, in nearby River Legacy Park, there's an overgrown bridge that's only accessible by foot. Paranormal investigators and thrill seekers make the journey to the bridge to hear the screams of the teenage girls who died in the riverbed below. It was 1961, February 4th. A car with 6 Arlington area teenagers drove off the bridge at high speed. See, the wooden bridge had been burned out, unbeknown to them. There had been a sign warning drivers from using the bridge, but it had been removed by somebody. And to this day, it said the screams of the girls can be heard at night. It's most likely the screams will be heard on the specific dates the wreck occurred. And there have been a few reports of visual encounters, but a few that might involve glowing lights on the bridge. Large orbs seem to travel back and forth across the bridge for a few minutes and dissipate. That's been reported a number of times. Less common, there have been a few reports of 3 teenage girls walking along the road. They're dressed in the style of the day and disappear when the observers get too close. Arlington High School teens were joyriding after attending a movie earlier that evening. As they approached the bridge, going relatively fast for the nighttime road, they couldn't see it may not have been safe. It was about 9:30 that evening. Like what happened their vehicle fell through the bridge, and it crashed into the other side of the rocky ravine, and it rolled over, and they landed upside down. Mary Lou Goldner, 16, Claudia Jean Reeves, 17, were instantly killed. Another passenger, Kathy Fleming, was taken to the hospital, and she died by 2 o'clock in the morning that Sunday morning. 3 other girls were injured: Donna Post, Dorothy Ibsen, and Joanne Anderson. They all had multiple fractures and each had a concussion. Joanne Anderson was in critical condition even after undergoing emergency brain surgery. The reports at this spot indicate hearing the screams, and sometimes they even see the girls. Also reports of glowing orbs of energy and the sounds of the girls crying and odd physical sensations such as soft touches on the back. Well, there's a trail that leads to two old fence posts. This is not too far from the Screaming Bridge. It's reported the missing gate used to be the last thing a captured Civil War soldier saw before he was hung. Some of the reported phenomena people have reported are hearing the soldiers' sobs at night in Hell Gate's vicinity. Also, a red-headed man in Civil War uniform has been seen standing guard at the gate. A lot of folks report feeling very uneasy near this spot, even when they've had no previous knowledge about that area's stories or legends. Several people reported the sensation of being watched. A few people reported odd sounds and hearing disembodied voices in the area. Well, even the most popular and successful amusement parks aren't immune to hauntings. And Six Flags Over Texas is a perfect illustration of that point. It's one of the most popular parks in the world and also one of the most haunted. Paranormal activity is still being reported, and it can be interesting to see what more can be uncovered about the little girl Annie who drowned at that location. Other folks have drowned at various spots in the world, so what draws Annie back to this particular spot? Is it how she died, or the fact that an amusement park somehow prompted her spirit to come visit? If that's the case, why does she only seem to emerge after the park was built? That's a question we'll never know the answer to. Well, from Six Flags Over Texas, let's go to the Enchanted Forest in Salem, Oregon. There's a 20-acre plot of land in the middle of a beautiful forest in Salem. Forests of Oregon are said to be magical in their own right, making a trip to the Enchanted Forest theme park an experience like no other. This combination of towering ancient forest and handcrafted fantasy land has some folks down on the authenticity of the encounters at this location. But given the history of the area and the number and consistency of the encounters, this is certainly an area worth study if you're into the paranormal. It was in 1964 that Roger Tofty spent every penny he had to purchase the land and start work on his passion. He hand-built the Enchanted Forest. He thought this original 20 acres of land off Interstate 5 for $4,000. The park officially opened Sunday, August 8, 1971. Now, this location is known as a hotbed of supernatural phenomena. And from the very beginning, there have been reports of a ghostly presence at several attractions. The haunted house and challenge of Mondor, interesting enough to have caught the Travel Channel's attention, and paranormal investigation team Ghost Adventurers. Zach Baggins and Aaron Goodwin and the crew went to Oregon to examine the park. While on site, the Ghost Adventures team interviewed Ashley Tofty, Roger Tofty's granddaughter. She admits feeling anxious and creeped out in the park, especially at the old house. Ghost Adventures team recorded a cold spot that had no logical reason for existing. It could have been attributed to supernatural presence, but unfortunately, hard evidence was lacking. Also interviewed was the operator of the wizard-themed Challenge of Mondor, Chris Dunn. He had a particularly interesting encounter in 2016. It was early morning, before the park opened. He's preparing the target shooting attraction for the day. Heard footsteps coming up behind him and turned to look, and there was nobody there. Now, he'd been operating the attraction for a sufficient amount of time and knew the layout of the area. He also knew the comings and goings of the other park employees, and he was very familiar with the sounds of the area. He said being early morning, there was nobody else about, and no other sounds to be heard. But the footsteps were clearer and grew in volume as they approached me. That's what caused me to turn and look. And the footsteps stopped as soon as I turned and didn't begin again until I turned back to work. After that event, of course, I felt creeped out. I knew other employees were nearby, but I suddenly felt very alone in that forest. He also reported a physical sensation when turning to look for the origin of the footsteps. He said, when I turned and the sound of the footsteps stopped, I got hit with an energy that passed right through me. I felt really dizzy, and then I got the chills. He said later in the day, the same thing happened, only with more intensity. And given the number of people around him and the noise of the attraction, he didn't hear any more footsteps. Still, he had that same physical sensation he had earlier. In addition to the auditory aspect of this encounter and the physical sensations reported, Dunn took pictures of the attraction before it opened for operation. There were no other guests or park employees in the area. But in these pictures, there does appear to be an orb that changes shape in 3 of the photos. Those 3 photos are in sequential order, indicating the orb was in motion. Well, the Ghost Adventures team also spent a night in the park. They reported some of the same occurrences, such as feeling a chilling energy at the same location as Dunn in the Challenge of Mondor attraction. They also reported communicating with a spirit in the haunted house, but this encounter is not sufficiently verified. Over the years, park employees and attendees have reported feeling they were being watched. There have been reports of physical phenomena such as hand touches and pushes and pinches while in the haunted house when nobody else is nearby. And there have been audible occurrences such as voices and distant screams. Cold spots, especially in a haunted house, were also reported. A lot of folks reported a sensation of energy passing through their bodies at the Challenge of Mondor attraction. And energy orbs have been reported on a few occasions. Now, there haven't been any reported tragedies or deaths in the park since its construction to account for the site's paranormal activity. It can safely be assumed the origin of the activity is due to the area's history. This location was the scene of several bloody battles between Native American tribes of the Willamette Valley and early settlers. Also, thousands of agonizing deaths in the area due to disaster and starvation. This amount of turmoil and suffering can easily account for this level of paranormal activity. But of all the reported incidents at this particular park, you have to wonder why a paranormal research team would visit the park and didn't spend more time investigating the history. Well, that's something. If you're going to do some psychic research, check out the history of the area. Quite often it's not what's built on the land, but the land itself that has the hauntings. Well, let's go to Sandusky, Ohio, Cedar Point. In Ohio, on the shore of Lake Erie, there's a peninsula named Cedar Point. It's also an amusement park at the location. It has the same name. It sits on 364 acres of land. It's near Sandusky. Cedar Point's one of the oldest amusement parks in America and one with a reportedly high level of paranormal activity. And despite a number of disturbing incidents, Cedar Point's one of the most popular amusement parks in the world. It was opened in 1870. And the park and surrounding area have a long history. Originally, it was the site of a lighthouse, was a port used mainly by fishermen. In 1867, a railroad was built, and this new avenue of transportation altered that area immensely. The area developed quickly, and construction boomed. Tourism grew, and bathhouses, picnic areas, and other minor attractions were built to encourage it. So it made sense to build an amusement park at that location. Now, there's no known underlying reason for the high level of paranormal activity, but the entire park is said to be haunted. Sightings and encounters have been reported in almost every area of the park. And this level of activity does make sense anecdotally. The area was densely populated with the poor and hardworking in the late 1800s, and these were the folks who were prone to dying from accidents and starvation and infection and even murder. Often died tragically. Pitiful deaths could easily have gone unreported. The oldest and possibly best known spirit is that of an old woman said to have died during the Revolutionary War. She was often encountered in the carousel area, specifically on one horse, referred to as Muller's military horse. It was carved in 1917 by Daniel C. Muller. Beautiful piece of carving, considered the only haunted carousel horse in existence. Story behind the haunted carousel horse is rather simple. When she saw her husband's beautiful creation, Miss Muller fell in love with it. She loved the carved horse so much she returned after her death to ride it. Also rumored she's made the horse impossible to photograph. Most common reason for this is her desire to keep others from falling in love with the horse. Now, the horse, which had been part of the frontier town carousel at Cedar Point for years, had been possibly lost, stolen, misplaced, or intentionally hidden, as it currently can't be tracked down. Frontier Town Carousel was moved to Dorney Park in Pennsylvania, except for the Muller horse. Fiberglass replica replaced the original at the Merry-Go-Round Museum in Sandusky. Another part of the legend states that Ms. Muller was caught cheating on her husband with a jockey. According to the story, Mr. Muller killed both his wife and the jockey and put their bones inside the horse. It's speculated her ghost returns to ride the horse at midnight because she was denied a proper burial. And in addition, her remains aren't resting in peace, but are moved continuously about by the carousel. No way to verify this part of the story, as the horse has gone missing, as I say, but never been any mention of the appearance of the jockey's ghost anywhere around. Another interesting tidbit is that some riders felt leg pains while riding. When they got off the ride, they discovered bite marks corresponding to the carved horse's mouth. Also reported were odd sensations on several horses, such as undulations or rippling, like muscles under the horse's skin, as if they were actually flesh and blood. Also temperature changes, but these weren't as commonly reported as the visual apparitions. And finally, some park employees reported after dark they could hear the carousel music as if it were in the distance, though they were standing right next to the dark stationary ride. One of the rarest but creepiest reported phenomena concerning the horse's eyes. Several employees reported one night in the early 1950s when cleaning the carousel after hours, they observed the horse's eyes rolling in the head as if trying to look at him. This wasn't a brief encounter, as the eyes moved like this for several minutes. There's an old story known to be told in the early 1900s, but has faded away with time, which would let you think this might be a false story. But according to the story, there was once a black skeletal horse on the carousel. Its name was carved with tiny bones knotted into it. There was an image of a jockey carved into the saddle. Now, no paranormal activities are associated with this horse, and there are no records that ever existed. But stories tend to pop up from time to time. Another location on the park grounds is Hotel Breakers, which is reputed to be a hotspot for paranormal activity from various spirits. Hotel Breakers dates back to the early 1900s, the oldest building on Cedar Point. Been many reports of activity and encounters since the beginning of the last century, though details are, of course, vague. Now, since opening in the early 1900s, employees and guests have reported paranormal activity in the hotel, specifically in room 169. Before the hotel grew into what it is today, it was a smaller resort. A guest named Mary was said to have hung herself in room 169's shower. And over the years, guests staying in that room reported problems with electric devices such as static, sporadically turning on and off. On a few occasions, there were reports of a female voice coming through an appliance, such as a television or a music listening device, such as a tape player or an iPod. Also, reports of crying that sounded like it was coming from the bathroom. Crying was reportedly loudest in the shower, but there's been no accounting for the sound's origin. Shower has been reported to turn on and off by itself. Issues become so prevalent, the room and this entire section of the hotel were closed to public use and are now used to house employees. The suicide of a guest by the name of Mary has never been officially documented, and no record to be found by anybody. Another site of paranormal activity is the hotel's balcony. It said that a man and a woman made a suicide pact, decided to jump off the balcony together. When the time came, the female lost her nerve and either stayed on the balcony or caught herself right as she jumped and pulled herself back up. The male did commit suicide. He haunts the balcony and he seems angry about the betrayal. Females will go onto the balcony and report being pulled toward the edge or shoved from behind when at the edge. Of course, there's nobody around when these women report being shoved, so there's no trickery or foul play being suspected. Few females reported hearing a growling noise and feeling icy fingers on their arms and backs. So far, nobody's been injured or actually pushed over the edge of the balcony, at least that we know about. Well, the hotel's ballroom is all said to be haunted. Reports are inconsistent, though, and seem suspiciously similar to the Haunted Mansion attraction at the Disney theme parks, rather than any real-life event. Visitors have spotted ghostly dancers in the ballroom dressed in Victorian attire, style that predates the hotel. Because of the sheer number of sightings in the ballroom, though, they're worth mentioning. Being true to them, even just some of them, it'd make this one of the most haunted areas of the park. And although a modern restaurant chain, the TGI Fridays restaurant at Cedar Point is located in the Hotel Breakers. Dinners at the restaurant reported seeing items on the wall moving on their own. Movements described weren't subtle, but a purposeful movement of one isolated object. This rules out the cause as being the wind or a minor earth tremor that might cause all objects to move. Also reported that the TGI Fridays are faceless specters. They've been reported throughout the hotel. Most reports come from the restaurant. It's unclear why this area would be haunted, although nobody's sure what was located there before TGI's was built. Breakwater Cafe at Cedar Point is another area reported to be haunted. At the tip of the peninsula overlooking that area had been reports of the apparition of a young boy in the cafe. Now, the boy drowned in the lake right off the patio of the cafe, and several diners reported seeing him in the water staring up at him. Although there have been reports of screams of the boy yelling for help. Now, there is no record of a boy drowning at this location, but given the long history of the area, it's very likely people have drowned and have been reported. And there have been reports of shadow people or shadowy figures walking near CJ's Provisions on the Front Trail. Most sightings are by employees who are in the area before and after the park opens. Figures are most commonly seen walking past open doors when the observer is inside a building. Employees have also reported feeling a disturbing presence while in the stand, usually when they're alone. According to legend, the shadows are of a young woman walking the Frontier Trail looking for her boyfriend. And since there's no official record of why she might have been doing this is actually just speculation. But since this area was the location of a few battles or military actions during the Civil War, it can be logically assumed this female entity is possibly the ghost of a nurse or a widow. Nurse makes the most sense, as a nurse would have witnessed the horrors of war and would have perhaps fallen in love with a soldier who died or was executed. And it is possible a nurse who was murdered or took her own life in despondence if a soldier she loved went home to a wife, or she felt guilty as he passed away in her care. Well, of all the stories surrounding this particular park, the haunted carousel horse is the most interesting. And naturally, the one that gets repeated the most. But most paranormal activity is reported in the Hotel Breakers. Locations rich with history and incidents that might intrigue a paranormal researcher. The area wasn't always designated a place for fun and happiness, but was a place where hard-working people lived hard lives. A lot of people died there that most likely were never missed, or if they were missed, their loved ones had no idea where they went. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be talking about more amusement parks and places of enjoyment in future shows. Until tomorrow at this time, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening.